Robbie, Dad's home!
What is it? Brad.
Welcome back to the In-Cut Movie Review. Today we have Quiet Place Day 1. Finally, a prequel that was needed.
As you can tell from the title of this movie, it is a prequel, and it picks up from day one of the invasion of these creatures from A Quiet Place. If you've seen the first two A Quiet Place movies, you would know a burning question from a lot of the fans of this series was, where did these creatures come from? What was it like when they first invaded? How did they get to planet Earth? How did the humans react? And pretty much we see that all happen and transpire in this movie. The setting is in New York City. Lupita Nyong'o's character is the main character of this whole movie. She plays Sam, and we find out at the start of the movie that she is a hospice patient. She's dying of cancer, and her one last wish before this invasion happens is to get pizza. The invasion happens, that's still her last wish, and she spends pretty much the whole movie traversing New York City to get this last slice of pizza. Joseph Quinn's character Eric is introduced a little bit later in the film, and Lupita's character Sam saves him from being killed, and he pretty much tags along with her for the rest of the movie as a way to sort of say thanks, and also he has no idea what's going on in the world, and he's a bit lost and scared, and she's pretty level-headed because, I mean, she was pretty much dying before this, so all she's driven and caring about doing is getting this slice of pizza, and her and Joseph's character sort of develop a little bit of I don't know if it's a love interest, but they develop a kindred relationship, and this universe is sort of a backdrop in a way for just their love relationship to grow and transpire. And I liken it a little bit to A Last of Us Episode 3 with Nick Offerman, where the zombie apocalypse was just the backdrop for the main story, which was this love relationship, and shows that love can transpire even in the most craziest of worlds. This movie sort of has that feel about it as well, where, yes, based all about finding out about the etymology of these creatures from the first two A Quiet Place films, but also giving us a plot with a little bit of substance and something to sort of attach yourself to rather than just people getting murdered the whole time by these creatures that are just completely way stronger than humans, way more overpowered than humans, and pretty much humans don't stand a chance against them at all. We also have a little bit of a cameo, I guess you could call it, from Digimon Honsu, who's a character from Quiet Place 2, and I think that's sort of just a way to tie the two movies into the same universe and also show how his character came to be on the island, not Epstein's Island, but on the island. He wasn't on the flight logs.
We checked.
Yeah, we checked. He wasn't on the flight logs.
Any comments on the alleged allegation of your connection with Jeffrey Epstein?
A Quiet Place 2, and it's sort of just a nice little way to show his character. One thing that was sort of a little bit annoying about this movie, I wish he was in it a little bit more. He's barely in it, and from the trailers you think, oh, he's going to be in this for a long time, and I mean, his character in the second movie commanded such sort of respect on the screen because he'd worked his way into being able to survive this whole world, yet in the trailers, he's sort of shown in this movie that he was going to be in it a lot. Not really, which is sort of a bit annoying. And another character in the movie, which is very prominent, but doesn't talk at all or anything like that, is Lupita's cat, which is, for some reason, I don't know why they put a cat in this movie. I guess, I don't know.
Didn't really make sense for the cat to be in it, to be honest. Like, some of the scenes literally logically did make sense, but you can kind of look past it just because, you know, it's an alien invasion movie. It's not really something you need to follow logically. I don't know if you guys own cats or anything, but they hate water. I'm pretty sure they don't like swimming. So yeah, watching that thing go dunked under twice and then not making a peep and not scratching anyone or not making a sound the whole movie. I'm pretty sure cats meow like crazy. Like, I can almost hear one now. One thing we have to speak about here is Lupita's acting, because how hard it must be to be able to convey an emotion where you have to be quiet, and especially after this initial scene where she gets knocked out and stuck in rubble because, you know, the aliens have invaded, and she gets saved by Digimon Honsu, and as she's waking up, she has to be quiet, so she has no air in her lungs, she has all rubble and dust in there, and as you can probably see it in the trailer, it must be so hard to convey that type of acting and facial expressions over something where you just minuscule like that. I think makes a very good actress.
One of the things that makes this franchise so great is the immersion in the silence. You know, like in Hollywood, especially these days with movies, it's all about being loud, boisterous, really enormous musical scores and really enormous sort of like special effects sounds, everything like that. Whereas in The Quiet Place, it's so different because it is literally silent. Now, in this movie, it goes away from that a little bit, only because in A Quiet Place 1 and 2, they're sort of experts in keeping quiet by now. They're sort of experts in making sure they don't alert the creatures. That they've sort of had I don't know, I think it's 100 days in, I think it is the first one. They've had that amount of time to get used to the creatures, hunting them, and ways around getting around the creatures. Whereas in this movie, it goes away a little bit from that. It's to be expected. It's showing how the creatures got to Earth. So that aspect of it, while it isn't in it as much, I think that's a good way to differentiate between the timelines between this movie and then obviously the John Krasinski A Quiet Place #1. Now, there are aspects in this movie where the silence part of it doesn't really work in a way where you see Lupita's character or you see Joseph Quinn's character or just any character, background character in the movie sort of making, or what would look like making noise, and you sort of think to yourself, they would hear that. The creatures would hear that. You're going to have problems with that making a movie where they're in like the middle of New York and there's rubble everywhere and there's thousands of people in the street. You're going to have that problem, but in this movie, more than the other two movies, I did notice that there were certain moments they would have made noise, or they definitely made noise when that happened, or she definitely breathed, or so the fact that in the first two movies we've seen how well these creatures can hear, how well they are at hunting the humans, how the lengths that John Krasinski and Emily Blunt's characters go to not to make a single bit of noise, whereas in this movie they've sort of relaxed that a little bit, I feel, because for instance there's a scene at the beginning where a generator turns on and only one creature shows up, this gigantic loud diesel generator. If that's in A Quiet Place 1 or 2, they're killing, there's hundreds of them showing up and they're killing every single person in this building. Yet in this movie, a gigantic loud diesel generator is running for fucking 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and only one creature shows up and it wipes out our man, and then no more rock up, and then none of the humans in the building are even like concerned or about the fact that one of them was in the basement.
As Geordie's saying, with that diesel scene, the scene literally right after that following, they hear a little bell getting hit by the cat, and then all of a sudden there's like 4 of them outside, and there's a whole horde of them just waiting to come into the place. So it is a little, deficient in some of the areas, but as we say, it is going to happen. The cinematography I noticed in this film reminded me a lot of the game Prototype, where it's almost dystopian before the virus outbreak. When it comes down to Invasion Day, it looks almost identical. And I think a lot of other movies preface that because, dystopian is probably very hard to picture, especially during an alien invasion. So a little bit like Independence Day took a little bit of these bits of these other big movies and kind of made it its own. I thought that was an interesting take from the director to try and transform his own way. But in some scenes though, it did look very on set, very Hollywood. It was very noticeable with the cars on fire, the green screen in the back. Those little things needed to be a little attention to detail would have been nice, but it's very hard to do that. But they did a good job overall.
Yeah, the sets definitely, there were certain scenes where they were showing the post-alien invasion where, the streets totaled, you've got the flipped over cars, you've got the little fires burning in the street, but that's exactly what they look like. It was like a little tiny fire in the middle of the street, and you were like, well, that doesn't look, what's it burning from? It was like burning on top of concrete. It was burning on top of asphalt. And I was just, you look at it and you're sort of like, well, it's literally smouldering on nothing. There's nothing on fire there. Then there was like a turned over car and it sort of looked very setty. It was just a street in Hollywood Boulevard that they'd put a flipped over car in, and then they'd sprayed a bit of dirt here, and they'd, it looked, and I don't know, it's a bit weird to say that, and I know it probably sounds a bit weird, but in certain movies and certain things, you see roads and you see places totaled, and it looks like what carnage and chaos and being attacked would look like, whereas in this movie there was certain bits where it just looked out of place, like, oh, we have to have a flipped over car here, and we have to have a smouldering fire there, and then a perfect little path for Lupita's character to walk. It didn't look like it was really what would happen in all that chaos. If that was really that chaos, there'd be shit everywhere. Think Walking Dead on that highway where all the cars are splattered everywhere, or Zombieland on that highway where they're driving through all the different cars on the highway. I like to think this movie looked a lot like War of the Worlds, a cheaper version of it though. And when you think back to War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise back in 2006, the way how it was sort of dark in the filming and it made all the streets look really just destroyed, really apocalyptic. Whereas in this movie, it just, certain aspects of it just felt like it was just a Hollywood lot, and they've just chucked a car here, there to sort of make it, oh yeah, now she's in a dystopian world. One of the cool things this movie did was it showed the biology of these creatures, these aliens that came and invaded Earth. Now, they look a lot like, up close, xenomorphs, where they sort of have a shield over their whole body, and the shield on their face sort of opens up, and then inside that shield is a mouth and their ears, and obviously they've got no eyes because they can't see, but we get to see that really up close in a certain scene where Joseph Quinn's character is right next to one of these aliens as it opens up its mouth, and you see sort of the inner workings of them, and that's really cool to see because from the first two Quiet Place movies, you see these monsters from a distance and you sort of see them running around, but you don't really get to see them up close. So I guess seeing them up close shows really truly how scary they are, the sort of the fear that you would feel looking at them. Now, they also remind you a lot of clickers from The Last of Us as well. If you've seen those, where they've got the sporadic face with the spores growing everywhere, it sort of reminds you a lot of those, especially with the way that they're zoned so much in on their hearing. I guess that's sort of, they've taken in elements from Alien, Xenomorphs, from clickers on The Last of Us, and then sort of mashed that in together into this crazy looking alien sort of creature. And we learn in this movie that the creatures sort of do work in a pride, or do work in some sort of a pack, where one creature hunts for the rest and then sort of calls the other ones in to eat or to hunt the rest of them, and they have lookouts. And I guess that's sort of a cool way to show what these creatures are and how they're actually turning and how they're actually working, and whether they're here just to kill all the humans on the planet or if they're actually there for a reason. But from this movie, we just pretty much gather that they hate noise and they want to stop all noise.
If they're working in packs, they got some form of intelligence about them. Instead of in the first one, I think they just basically run around killing anything that makes a noise. And same with the second. So you don't really know anything about them, but this divulges everything about them. The biology Geordie was saying those two things, I think they look like demogorgons from Stranger Things, and funnily enough, one of the actors was from that TV show, so maybe it was a bit of a idea switch, I'm not sure, but yeah, it did look very similar to a demogorgon.
That's one of the main things to know going into this movie is, while it detracts a little bit away from the silence aspect, which is completely in the first two movies, which all about the silence and you're sort of on the edge of your seat, while in this movie you are still, it's mainly about showing the creatures. As we said at the start of the review, it would have been cool to see certain aspects from this movie, maybe how the humans figured out that the aliens didn't like noise and that they could only hear and not see. Because in the movie, all we see is a chopper fly over 5 seconds after the invasion, and then someone on a loudspeaker saying, hey, everyone be quiet. They can't see, they can only hear. It would have been cool to figure out how the army knew that. We don't really find that out. They just know straight away, which is sort of annoying. I think going into this movie, I was sort of hoping we were going to find maybe a certain scene that happened, and then somebody realized the light switch goes off, that someone realizes that they only can hear, they can't see. I thought that might be why the cat was in there. Maybe the cat had a certain scene where that happens, but no, it just sort of gets proven to them in like the first 5 seconds of the invasion. Oh, don't make noise. A little bit annoying, but you know.
So as always, we end these reviews with a rating, and I'm probably going to rate this about a 70%, maybe 80%. There was really nothing wrong about this movie apart from some illogical scenes, but it was a great intro or prequel to show what the aliens do, how they hunt, and you can't look past the acting in this. It was amazing from the main two actors. And the only thing I miss in this was Krasinski. If Krasinski was in this, I'd rate this a 10, honestly, because that man's acting's next level, and he just brings something else to this. But at least he produced it and still writes this. So if you're wondering to go see this film, I think you do need to go see this if you're a fan of the Quiet Place franchise. And it's definitely going to have more of them too, by the way. So definitely see this.
I rate this movie about a 75-80%. I love prequel movies that show the beginning of a post-apocalyptic world. I love any movie that sort of shows the ending of a world, especially because different movies have different ways, or different directors have different ways of showing how they think the end of the world came about. And it's always cool to sort of see, like, one of my favorite movies growing up was War of the Worlds, and I loved watching sort of the way the world divulged into chaos. And this movie showed that in spurts, and I sort of thought it was really cool. I would have liked maybe if the prequel was about John Krasinski and Emily Blunt's family and how that all began. That probably would have drawn me in a little bit more, just because we grew to like that family so much in the first Quiet Place. But I get it, you know, Krasinski doesn't really want to do that anymore, and it's understandable. But Lupita and Joseph did a great job in this movie. And, you know, if you're not really a fan of a Quiet Place franchise, you may find this a little bit slow, a little bit boring. But if you're a fan of the franchise, you'll love it, because you get to see the creatures and you get to see how they work more than what we've seen in the last two movies that came out. Digimon Honshu should have been in it for more, though. That's the main bad thing about this movie. He should have been in it way more. They missed the trick there.
Exactly. So don't forget, guys, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the content, subscribe to keep up with our latest stuff. If you enjoyed it, like it. If you didn't, leave a dislike. We don't mind.
Question of the day: what's your favorite post-apocalyptic movie? Mine is a trusty old favorite. I love 2012, even though it freaks me out watching that, because I think it's going to happen any day now. But that movie, love it.
Yeah, 100%. I have to do War of the Worlds. I mean, I have it as a poster behind me, and I grew, as same as Geordie, I grew up on that film and loving the fact that there was some type of destruction and chaos in a world which I've never seen. And it was based off an old radio log or something, right? Where a guy faked it or whatever. It was interesting. So, yeah, that for me. Anyway, guys, peace. We out.
And cut.